Look closely at the television screen right now, and you will see something that completely defies every known law of modern sporting logic, athletic pacing, and historical football tradition. It is the glorious summer of 2026, and across the ultra-modern, architecturally stunning stadiums of the United States, Mexico, and Canada, the greatest tournament on earth is reaching a fever pitch under a completely terrifying new paradigm. The arenas are packed to absolute capacity with millions of screaming fans. The global television audience is tracking into the billions, and the pressure hanging in the humid air is heavy enough to completely crush ordinary men. Yet, what truly shocks the tactical managers, corporate broadcasters, and data analysts watching from the sidelines is not just the high-intensity performance of the players, but a radical, highly controversial set of guidelines that has completely restructured the temporal mechanics of the beautiful game. FIFA has officially launched a brutal, multi-billion-dollar war against a single, invisible enemy: time wasting. For nearly a century, elite players had mastered the dark arts of manipulation, systematically burning valuable minutes off the clock by tying their boots, faking sudden hamstring injuries, or taking an agonizingly slow walk toward the corner flag during late-game substitutions. But in 2026, those calculated delay tactics have been entirely obliterated by a set of hyper-strict rules implemented to maximize the continuous ball-in-play metrics for the global streaming audience. The introduction of the highly visible 5-second countdown for throw-ins and goal kicks has completely transformed the physical pacing of the match, forcing goalkeepers and fullbacks to operate under a relentless, ticking clock. If a player dares to exceed the limit on a throw-in, possession is instantly switched to the opposing team. If a goal kick is delayed by a single second, the opposition is automatically awarded a corner kick. Furthermore, the implementation of the strict 10-second limit for substitutions means that the moment the digital board goes up, a player must exit the pitch immediately at the nearest boundary line. If they fail to comply, the incoming substitute is legally forced to wait on the sideline for 1 full minute, leaving their team to suffer with 10 players in a high-stakes competitive environment. Even fake injuries have become an incredibly expensive tactical luxury. If an athlete receives medical attention from a physio on the pitch, they are now required to leave the field of play for exactly 1 minute, effectively forcing their team into a temporary disadvantage unless it is the goalkeeper. These hypermodern rules were engineered by tech-centric data analysts to guarantee more actual football and less dead time, turning the traditional 90-minute match into an ultra-accelerated athletic sprint. But while the multi-million-dollar broadcast spreadsheets are celebrating this massive surge in continuous action, the extreme physical toll on the human body is reaching an absolute, terrifying breaking limit. Midfielders are burning through their physical reserves at an unprecedented rate, and managers are discovering that their traditional tactical formulas are completely useless when players can no longer catch their breath during restarts. This massive shift has entirely rewritten the parameters of international success, proving that past historical glory means absolutely nothing if your athletes cannot survive the relentless speed of the modern system. The world is watching this temporal revolution unfold in absolute, breathless awe, fully aware that the rules surrounding the sport have permanently evolved. But this contemporary obsession with regulating time is not a sudden, isolated occurrence in the halls of FIFA. It is actually the culmination of a dark, century-long historical struggle where the governing body was repeatedly forced to step in and entirely rewrite the laws of the game to rescue the sport from the brink of absolute physical destruction. To truly understand how we arrived at this hyper-regulated era of 2026, we must step back into the dark archives of football history, away from the luxurious, high-tech stadiums of North America, and travel to a moment where a single, shocking breakdown in tactical discipline forced FIFA to engineer a visual revolution that permanently changed the face of sports broadcasting forever. Imagine the immense, unyielding brutality of contesting a high-stakes knockout match under the blinding, suffocating noon sun of Mexico City, with your hamstring muscles completely torn by severe cramps, fully aware that if your bone breaks or your knee ligament ruptures, your nation is legally forced to play the remainder of the match with 10 men on the pitch. For the pioneer athletes who engineered the early decades of international football history, this extreme biological and physical trauma was not a dramatic metaphor used for television commentary. It was the absolute, unyielding reality of the rulebook. Until the very end of the 1960s, The concept of a tactical or medical substitution simply did not exist in FIFA's official regulatory framework for the World Cup. If your goalkeeper suffered a compound fracture or your primary star striker was violently knocked unconscious by a cynical challenge, a regular outfield player was forced to pull on a mismatched jersey, put on the gloves, and desperately defend the goal line while the remaining teammates retreated into an exhausted block of pure, raw survival. The financial spreadsheets of the era treated human capital as entirely disposable assets, and the structural integrity of the sport was routinely sacrificed in the name of an archaic, outdated notion of stoic masculine endurance. But as the historic 1970 World Cup approached, the global ecosystem of the beautiful game shifted on its axis due to a powerful variable that traditional purists never willingly admit: the crushing economic pressure of international television rights. Global broadcasting networks and corporate conglomerates had invested unprecedented multi-million-dollar fortunes to beam the vivid imagery of the tournament live and in full color to multiple continents for the first time in history. These corporate entities were absolutely not willing to see their astronomical marketing investments decimated because the tournament's most valuable, highly publicized assets were being systematically broken by unchecked physical violence in the group stages. This commercial and humanitarian urgency forced FIFA to finally rewrite its ancient code, introducing the revolutionary permission of 2 official substitutions per team. On paper, it read like a minor bureaucratic amendment. In practice, it was the literal birth of modern tactical engineering. For the first time in football history, managers ceased to be passive spectators of human degradation and transformed into active, real-time chess architects. The Soviet Union permanently etched their name into the digital archives by executing the first official substitution in World Cup history, withdrawing Viktor Serebryakov to unleash the fresh legs of Anatoly Pusak against Mexico. This single rule change completely shattered the traditional paradigms of long-term squad planning, inflating the financial market as elite clubs realized they could no longer rely on a solitary 11-man spreadsheet, but needed to curate a deep, multi-million-dollar reservoir of specialized talent on the bench. It fundamentally transformed tactical preparation from an exercise in stolid physical survival into a dynamic game of squad rotation and biological resource management. Every single dollar flowing into academy systems suddenly had a new purpose: developing a bench capable of altering the geometric lines of a match in the 75th minute. Yet, what the governing body and television executives completely failed to anticipate was that by opening the door to the calculated manipulation of game time and human exhaustion, they had planted a highly volatile seed of tactical exploitation. In the following decades, a new wave of highly analytical, cynical managers would discover a brilliant loophole, transforming this humanitarian protection into a devastating weapon designed to systematically murder the offensive rhythm of a match, freeze the clock, and force FIFA to implement a visual indicator of discipline that would forever change the color of football psychology on color television screens. The structural introduction of tactical substitutions in 1970 provided international managers with an unprecedented level of real-time control, but it also inadvertently unlocked a devastating, highly sophisticated loophole that threatened to fundamentally break the offensive poetry of the game. To truly understand why FIFA was eventually forced to implement one of the most radical, game-changing rule changes in the modern era, we must transition our historical spreadsheet to the highly controversial summer of 1982 in Spain. As live international color television broadcasts continued to expand into a multi-billion-dollar global entertainment machine, corporate sponsors and billions of viewers were tuning in to watch creative, free-flowing, high-scoring football. What they witnessed instead, especially during high-stakes knockout fixtures, was the tactical weaponization of time itself, engineered by defensive managers who had discovered a massive flaw in the sport's ancient structural mechanics: the backpass rule. Under the regulations of the time, any outfield player could under physical pressure turn directly toward their own goal and deliberately kick the ball back into the hands of their goalkeeper. The goalkeeper would slowly collect the ball, walk lazily across the penalty box to burn 20 or 30 seconds off the ticking stadium clock, drop the ball back to their feet, and wait for an opponent to chase them before picking it up again to restart the entire exhausting cycle. It was a legal, highly cynical method of killing a match's momentum, converting a beautiful athletic sprint into a paralyzed, unwatchable stalemate. The financial tracking sheets of broadcasting companies and global brands began to show a terrifying trend. as television audiences rapidly disconnected from matches that degenerated into continuous, repetitive passing routines between central defenders and their completely unpressured goalkeepers. The absolute lowest point of this turgid, structural manipulation arrived during a notorious group stage encounter between West Germany and Austria, a match forever recorded in the dark archives of the sport as the disgrace of Gijon. After West Germany scored an early goal in the 10th minute, a precise mathematical result that guaranteed automatic progression for both European nations at the direct expense of a highly entertaining Algerian team, the match completely died. For 80 consecutive minutes, players from both teams casually walked across the pitch, systematically executing low-risk back passes to their goalkeepers, who would comfortably hold the ball without a single ounce of competitive urgency. The stadium erupted into a wall of furious whistling. International commentators openly expressed their deep professional disgust on the live microphones, and millions of viewers worldwide watched in absolute disbelief as the ultimate sporting integrity of the World Cup was discarded on a multi-million-dollar altar of tactical convenience. This public relations and commercial disaster forced FIFA executives to recognize that if defensive blocks could legally paralyze the game by continuously retreating into the hands of a passive goalkeeper, the overall economic value of the entire sports enterprise would plummet. The governing body spent a decade gathering athletic metrics and consulting sports science data centers, desperately searching for a structural mechanism to permanently banish this anti-football strategy from the pitch. The definitive solution would finally arrive in 1992, completely rewriting the biological demands of the goalkeeper position and lay out the framework for an era of hyper-intensive modern pressing. But before that regulatory hammer could fall, an entirely separate crisis of physical violence in the defensive thirds would force the introduction of a visual indicator of discipline that forever altered the color of football psychology. The bitter fallout from the tactical manipulation witnessed throughout the 1980s did not just alienate fans. It presented FIFA with a critical economic crisis that threatened to permanently devalue international football broadcasting. As corporate sponsors and media networks poured larger fortunes into the game, television executives began demanding a structural change to prevent teams from locking matches into unwatchable stalemates. The absolute breaking point for the governing body arrived during the 1990 World Cup in Italy, a tournament universally criticized for its historically low goal-scoring metrics and cynical negative tactics. Defensive managers had perfectly weaponized the ancient loophole of the back pass, instructing their players to routinely kick the ball back to their goalkeepers whenever the opponent applied a shadow of pressure. Goalkeepers would comfortably catch the ball, waste valuable seconds walking around the box, and drop it back to their feet, only to repeat the cycle the moment a forward approached. It was a calculated, anti-football strategy that treated the stadium clock as an asset to be murdered rather than a window for athletic competition. The global television ratings were dropping into a dangerous spiral, forcing FIFA to realize that if defensive lines could legally paralyze the product, the financial foundation of the entire sports empire would collapse. This multi-million-dollar emergency led to the single most radical, game-changing rule amendment of the 20th century, the official introduction of the backpass rule in 1992. Under this revolutionary new guideline, a goalkeeper was strictly forbidden from handling the ball with their hands if it was deliberately kicked to them by a teammate's foot. On paper, it seemed like a subtle adjustment. In practice, it completely restructured the tactical topography of global football. Suddenly, goalkeepers were forced to develop the technical skills of traditional outfield players, transforming their role from isolated shot stoppers into the very first line of offensive build-up play. Any goalkeeper who lacked the technical composure to control a heavy pass under extreme pressure became a massive financial liability for their club, as high-pressing tactical systems suddenly emerged to exploit this newfound vulnerability. The rule change systematically accelerated the physical tempo of every match, forcing defensive lines to push higher up the pitch and generating a massive surge in scoring opportunities across global competitions. The backpass rule entirely saved the beautiful game from the brink of defensive suffocation, effectively shifting the balance of power from cynical time wasters back to creative, forward-thinking teams. It proved that by changing a single line in the regulatory framework, FIFA could completely alter the biological demands of an entire position and unlock a multi-billion-dollar era of hyper-intensive modern football entertainment. Yet, as the game became faster and more physically demanding, a massive imbalance began to grow between elite footballing nations, leading to a profound structural divide where a small group of wealthy countries began to monopolize the global stage, forcing FIFA to prepare an expansion plan that would completely rewrite the democratic boundaries of the World Cup forever. The profound transformation of international football from a localized, intensely physical sport into a multi-billion-dollar global entertainment empire reached a critical, turgid turning point during the high-stakes boardroom meetings leading up to the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. To truly appreciate the modern spectacle we witness on our screens today, we must look past the simple, romantic lens of historical highlights and analyze the massive economic and technological shifts that were quietly forcing FIFA to permanently alter the rulebooks of the beautiful game. The late 1960s introduced a technological revolution that forever shattered the traditional mechanics of sports broadcasting, the widespread adoption of live, international color television transmissions. For the very first time in human history, corporate television networks and global conglomerates could beam the vivid, colorful imagery of the world's greatest tournament directly into the living rooms of millions of households across multiple continents in real time. This single technological leap instantly transformed the financial spreadsheets of the sport, turning the tournament into an incredibly lucrative, high-priced marketing canvas for international brands who were suddenly willing to invest astronomical fortunes for direct television exposure. However, this massive surge in global commercial investment presented FIFA executives with a terrifying, high-stakes paradox. The multi-million-dollar corporate sponsors who were funding the expanding infrastructure of the global game were not investing their capital to watch defensive systems systematically rely on brutal, bone-crushing violence to stop the sport's most marketable, creative superstars. The dark, chaotic memories of the 1962 Battle of Santiago and the relentless, unchecked physical assault that had forced a frustrated Pelé out of the 1966 tournament in England were treated by executives not just as athletic tragedies, but as catastrophic threats to the commercial viability of the entire entertainment product. If the most famous, globally recognized players on Earth were continuously hospitalized by cynical, strategic fouls before the knockout rounds even commenced, the international television ratings would instantly collapse, taking billions of dollars in advertising revenue along with them. The sport desperately needed an immediate, highly visible systemic mechanism to regulate player behavior, discipline on-pitch violence, and establish a sense of psychological boundaries without relying on confusing, language barrier-dependent verbal warnings from regional referees. This commercial and cultural crisis led to the brilliant, structural introduction of the yellow and red card system, a concept beautifully engineered by British referee Ken Aston, who famously drew his creative inspiration from a simple, universal color coding of street traffic lights while sitting in his car at a busy London intersection. The cards provided an instant, non-verbal communication system that could be immediately understood by players, managers, and international television audiences alike, completely bypassing the complex linguistic challenges of an expanding, multicultural sport. The implementation of this single piece of plastic completely altered the psychological balance of power on the pitch, forcing defensive lines to abandon raw, unchecked violence and adapt to a more calculated, positioning-based tactical framework. It was a historic masterclass in structural engineering, a rule change born directly from the demands of international television finance that successfully protected the sport's human capital and laid the ultimate foundation for the hyper-intensive, celebrity-driven modern game. But as the multi-million-dollar corporate machinery of the sport continued to expand exponentially into the following decades, this newfound protection would soon spark an entirely new kind of tactical exploitation, forcing a future generation of cynical managers to find a devastating, loophole-driven method to weaponize time itself against the beauty of the game. The strategic evolution of the backpass and substitution framework successfully closed major regulatory loopholes, but by the dawn of the 1990s, FIFA was forced to confront an entirely separate, structural crisis that was systematically paralyzing the aesthetic beauty and multi-million-dollar entertainment value of international football. To truly understand the massive tactical landscape of the modern game today, we must analyze a historic transformation that took place immediately following the lowest scoring, most offensively stagnant World Cup tournament ever recorded in the dark archives of the sport. The 1990 World Cup in Italy had collapsed into a commercial disaster for international broadcasting networks and global conglomerates, who had invested unprecedented fortunes under the assumption that they were purchasing a fast-paced, high-scoring television product. Instead, defensive managers had perfectly engineered a cynical, hyper-restrictive application of the traditional offside rule, completely killing the attacking fluidity of the beautiful game. Under the archaic, century-old interpretation of the law, an attacking forward was legally required to be clearly ahead of the second-to-last defending opponent when a pass was executed. If they were perfectly level with the defender, the referee's flag would instantly go up, neutralizing the play. Highly analytical managers quickly realized they could simply instruct their entire backline to stand completely static or move forward in unison at a specific microsecond, locking opposing strikers into an unyielding geometric trap before they could even sprint toward the penalty box. Matches rapidly degenerated into continuous, turgid battles of offside traps and linesman flags, leaving stars completely isolated and cutting the overall goal-scoring metrics down to a miserable, historical low. The financial spreadsheets of tournament sponsors began to show a terrifying trend, as millions of international television viewers grew completely exhausted by a sport that had transformed from an open athletic sprint into a clinical, hyper-defensive stalemate. FIFA executives recognized that if defensive lines could legally paralyze the product simply by standing level with an attacker, the commercial viability of the entire global empire would disintegrate. This massive crisis led to the revolutionary offside rule amendment of 1990, where FIFA officially declared that an attacking player who was perfectly level with the second-to-last defender would now be considered completely onside. On paper, it read like a subtle bureaucratic adjustment. In practice, it was the literal birth of modern attacking transition play. Suddenly, elite forwards were granted a devastating physical advantage, allowing them to use their explosive speed to break through defensive structures the exact microsecond a pass left a midfielder's boot. The rule change systematically forced defensive lines across the planet to drop 10 to 15 meters deeper toward their own goal to avoid being instantly incinerated by a single vertical ball, effectively opening up massive, high-priced pockets of space in the middle of the pitch for creative playmakers to exploit. The continuous physical tempo of every single international match skyrocketed, completely shifting the balance of power back to high-scoring, forward-thinking teams and rescuing the television product from the brink of defensive suffocation. It proved that by altering a single geometric parameter in the rulebook, FIFA could completely reprogram the biological requirements of an entire sport and unlock a multi-billion-dollar era of hyper-intensive modern entertainment. Yet, as the game became faster and spaces became larger, the sheer speed of human reaction was about to reach its absolute biological limitation, setting the stage for a technological invasion that would permanently seize control of the referee's human authority and split the very soul of the footballing community into absolute, data-driven warfare. The strategic recalibration of the offside parameter in 1990 successfully forced defensive backlines to abandon their static traps, but as the global game accelerated into the high-stakes financial landscape of the late 20th century, FIFA faced an entirely separate behavioral epidemic that was actively destroying the competitive drama of knockout football. To understand why the governing body resorted to one of the most short-lived and psychologically brutal mechanisms in sporting history, we must travel back to the high-pressure atmosphere of the 1998 World Cup in France. The sports landscape had completely transformed into a corporate goldmine, with international broadcast agreements and sneaker brand endorsements generating historic revenue sheets that treated an early elimination from the knockout rounds as an absolute commercial catastrophe for top-tier football associations. This overwhelming economic fear of losing completely paralyzed the tactical ambition of national team managers during extra time. Instead of pushing forward to secure a victory, teams would retreat into deeply congested, hyper-defensive low blocks, completely content to run the stadium clock into the ground and gamble their entire multi-million-dollar destinies on the absolute lottery of a penalty shootout. The matches became painfully slow wars of attrition, exhausting the physical endurance of the players and driving global television audiences into absolute boredom during the most critical periods of primetime broadcasting. Desperate to rescue the entertainment value of their flagship tournament, FIFA executives officially activated the Golden Goal Rule, a sudden death mechanic dictating that the very first team to score during the 30 minutes of extra time would instantly win the match, terminating the game on the spot. On paper, it was marketed as a progressive structural change engineered to inspire bold, aggressive attacking play. In practice, it unleashed a reign of pure psychological terror on the pitch. The tactical anxiety didn't disappear, It exponentially amplified, as players realized that a single microscopic structural mistake or a loose pass in midfield would immediately result in instant death for their entire lifelong World Cup dream. The definitive, turgid manifestation of this regulatory nightmare arrived in the round of 16, when the host nation France found themselves completely locked in a suffocating stalemate against a stubborn, hyper-disciplined Paraguayan side. For 113 agonizing minutes, the tracking sheet showed a game governed by sheer panic, with defenders executing zero-risk clearances and refusing to break their positional lines. Then, in the second half of extra time, the stadium clock was permanently broken by a moment of raw, unscripted human emotion. A desperate, lofted cross floated into the Paraguayan box, where Laurent Blanc surged forward from his central defensive post to blast a low shot past the goalkeeper, instantly ending the match in a flash of chaotic ecstasy. While the host nation exploded into a wall of pure noise, the Paraguayan players collapsed directly onto the grass in absolute, instantaneous grief, completely stripped of any mathematical opportunity to mount a physical comeback. It was a historic masterclass in narrative tension, a rule change born directly from the corporate demand for instant resolution that permanently altered the biological and emotional limits of international football pressure. Yet, as the governing body continued to realize that manipulating the clock was not enough to manage the hyper-accelerated nature of modern athletic systems, an entirely separate technological revolution was quietly preparing to invade the pitch, seizing control of the referee's human authority and dividing the global game into an absolute, data-driven war over the exact definition of a single millimeter. The psychological trauma of the sudden death golden goal era proved that manipulating the stadium clock was an unstable solution, forcing FIFA to look entirely beyond the physical limits of human perception to rescue the sport's multi-billion-dollar commercial integrity. To understand the most deep, polarizing regulatory shift in the entire history of the beautiful game, we must transition our historical spreadsheet to the high-stakes, hyper-surveilled summer of 2018 in Russia. For over a century, the absolute, unyielding foundation of footballing law had rested on a single, fragile human element: the absolute authority of the on-pitch referee. If a human official missed a blatant handball in the penalty box, or if a linesman miscalculated a microscopic offside line by a fraction of an inch, the mistake was woven directly into the tragic, romantic folklore of the sport. Millions of fans in the stadium stands would scream, global television pundits would debate the controversy for weeks, and corporate financial balance sheets would simply absorb the damage. But as media broadcasting rights transformed into a massive, global enterprise worth tens of billions of dollars per tournament cycle, international corporate sponsors and elite club executives refused to let their multi-million-dollar investments be completely wiped out by a single, uncorrected human error. A solitary mistaken decision could instantly eliminate a historic footballing powerhouse from the knockout rounds, causing catastrophic financial cascading effects that collapsed global television ratings, tanked merchandise revenue streams, and destroyed years of meticulous corporate planning. This overwhelming economic anxiety birthed the absolute, structural invasion of the video assistant referee, universally recognized today as the VAR. Officially introduced to the global stage during the 2018 World Cup, this technological implementation completely stripped the on-pitch referee of their solitary, absolute power, subjecting every single major decision to a cold, clinical panel of video technicians sitting in a centralized data bunker in Moscow. Equipped with dozens of high-speed digital cameras, advanced split-screen playback monitors, and state-of-the-art ball tracking software, this unseen panel began systematically scanning the pitch for clear and obvious errors in 4 critical match-changing categories: goals, penalty decisions, direct red cards, and mistaken player identity. On paper, it was marketed to the global public as the ultimate validation of justice, a scientific guarantee that the sporting truth would always prevail. In practice, it completely fractured the psychological and emotional rhythm of the match. The traditional, instantaneous explosion of collective ecstasy that followed a world-class goal was entirely paralyzed, replaced by a suffocating, turgid window of visual uncertainty where players, managers, and millions of fans stood frozen in absolute silence, waiting for a remote technician to review pixelated lines on a digital monitor. The sport had transitioned from a spontaneous, human-driven spectacle into a clinical, data-driven courtroom drama where even the fans inside the stadium were entirely banned from understanding the real-time deliberations. Financial tracking centers revealed that the implementation of VAR instantly generated an unprecedented surge in penalty kicks, turning the 2018 group stages into a historic sequence of spot kicks that completely rewrote the tactical preparation of goalkeepers and forwards alike. It proved that by introducing an absolute digital surveillance grid, FIFA could completely take over the traditional human authority of the game, transforming microscopic fractions of a millimeter into multi-million-dollar corporate turning points. Yet, as the global community remained deeply split over this cold technological takeover, the governing body was already designing a brand new regulatory mechanism for the future, a rule that would completely seize control of the absolute physical distance between an attacker and a defender, setting up a terrifying automated trap that would leave the world's most elite strikers completely helpless under the blinding stadium lights of the next generation. The digital invasion of the video assistant referee in 2018 completely reprogrammed the emotional architecture of a goal celebration, but as the global game marched forcefully toward the historic winter of 2022 in Qatar, FIFA was preparing to unleash an even more clinical, machine-driven evolution. To fully grasp how the modern game transformed into a flawless mathematical grid where human attackers can no longer outrun or outsmart the machine, we must examine the high-stakes corporate and technological infrastructure behind the introduction of semi-automated offside technology. For decades, even with the presence of basic VAR review screens, the evaluation of offside decisions remained a deeply turgid process of manual line drawing. Technicians in remote broadcast booths were forced to manually select the exact frame of a pass and cross-reference it with lines layered over pixelated images of moving limbs, a system that routinely created agonizing 3 or 4 minute delays that completely murdered the continuous physical tempo of World Cup matches. Global television networks, whose multi-million-dollar primetime advertising slots are strictly calculated down to the precise second, grew intensely frustrated by these extended dead zones of broadcasting. More importantly, elite club executives and major sports betting conglomerates, operating within an industry where a single loose millimeter could shift the destination of a $100 million championship prize, demanded absolute, instantaneous mathematical certainty. This toxic collision of corporate finance and digital data analytics birthed the automated tracking framework used on the pitches of Qatar. FIFA completely insulated the stadiums with a highly sophisticated network of 12 specialized tracking cameras mounted directly beneath the roof, systematically mapping 29 distinct data points on each individual player's body 50 times per second to calculate their exact geometric position in real time. Inside the match ball itself, microchip sensors were suspended to transmit positional data 500 times per second, letting a central computer know the absolute microsecond a ball left a passer's foot. On paper, this was celebrated as the ultimate technological masterclass, a system designed to slash review times from minutes to mere seconds and provide unyielding, inarguable geometric truth. In practice, it turned the beautiful game into a hyper-surveilled courtroom where the romantic, human margin for error was completely slaughtered. Strikers who had spent their entire youth training their bodies to play on the absolute shoulder of the last defender were suddenly penalized because a single sleeve seam or the tip of a boot was caught a microscopic millimeter ahead of a defensive line. The opening match of the 2022 tournament provided a brutal showcase of this automated reality, when Argentina's high-velocity attacking line was systematically dismantled by 3 consecutive offside calls that were completely invisible to the human eye, entirely altering the physical momentum of a historic encounter. The traditional, passionate art of forward movement had been entirely captured by predictive software, transforming international football into a clean, automated discipline where humans were forced to bow to the flawless metrics of artificial algorithms. Yet, as the global sports landscape struggled to reconcile this hyper-technological reality with the traditional soul of the game, FIFA's relentless boardroom strategists were already shifting their gaze toward the future, finalizing a massive expansion plan that would throw the entire democratic and physical boundaries of the World Cup into absolute, unprecedented chaos. The automated offside grid of 2022 permanently altered the physical geometry of attacking play, but as the global game marched relentlessly toward the current summer of 2026, FIFA was preparing to execute the most massive, structurally disruptive rule change in the entire history of international football. To understand the unprecedented operational chaos unfolding across North America right now, we must look past the glittering corporate hospitality suites and analyze the cold, turgid financial spreadsheets that forced the governing body to permanently expand the World Cup from 32 teams to a staggering 48-team format. This massive geographical expansion was born directly from intense boardroom political lobbying and the insatiable demand from global marketing syndicates, who realized that adding 16 additional nations would instantly tap into entirely new television consumer markets, generating billions of dollars in fresh broadcasting revenue and streaming subscriptions. However, this corporate growth strategy completely fractured the traditional physical equilibrium of the tournament. International qualifiers across the planet degenerated into absolute wars of logistical attrition, with historically dominant footballing superpowers suddenly forced to navigate a grueling, expanded schedule of high-stakes matches while their multi-million-dollar squads were already buried under the brutal weight of the domestic European club calendar. The immediate, devastating reality of this expansion completely shattered the traditional paradigms of competitive balance. Elite players were legally forced to endure 20-hour transcontinental flights, rapidly crossing multiple time zones and completely exhausting their biological reserves just to contest midweek fixtures in high-altitude environments or freezing tropical conditions. The structural damage to the human capital of the sport became an immediate crisis for top-tier club managers, who watched helplessly as their most expensive assets returned from international breaks with severe muscle tears and structural joint trauma. In the historic South American qualifiers, the traditional giants found themselves completely trapped in a turgid deadlock, as lower-tier nations, fully aware that the expanded format offered them a realistic, high-priced ticket to the ultimate global stage, deployed hyper-aggressive, deeply congested defensive low blocks designed entirely to freeze the physical momentum of world-class playmakers. The tracking data centers monitoring these matches recorded a catastrophic drop in high-intensity sprints, proving that the sheer physical tolerance of the human body had finally collided with the insatiable commercial expansion of the machine. The balance sheets of global brands and television networks, which relied on these qualification fixtures to maintain their massive primetime advertisement loops, were suddenly held hostage by a sporting product that looked visibly exhausted and turgidly paralyzed by its own scale. The democratic expansion had promised to celebrate the global nature of the beautiful game, but it instead created a terrifyingly volatile competitive environment where legendary footballing dynasties began to systematically crumble under the relentless physical pacing of the new system. Former continental champions found themselves bottom of the qualification logs, unable to handle the high-velocity transition play of younger, hyper-athletic teams who were legally forbidden from slowing down the game by the new time-wasting rules. As the final rounds of the qualifiers reached their absolute culmination, multiple world-class squads found their multi-billion-dollar World Cup destinies hanging on a knife edge, transforming a cold administrative expansion into a raw, heart-stopping human drama over the definition of survival. Yet, as the world champions frantically restructured their entire medical and tactical infrastructure to endure this grueling 48-team marathon, an entirely separate corporate transformation was quietly taking place inside the stadium boardrooms, a hidden financial rule that would permanently strip traditional fans of their historical heritage and completely turn the sacred pitch into a high-priced commercial theater. The structural and geographical expansion of 2026 did not merely test the biological breaking points of the players. It triggered a brutal, multi-billion-dollar transformation inside the stadium boardrooms that permanently altered the very definition of who is allowed to witness the beautiful game in person. To truly understand how modern footballing governance has quietly reprogrammed the soul of matchday culture, we must analyze the high-stakes corporate mandates led across the arenas of North America during this current 2026 cycle. For nearly a century, the emotional heartbeat of the World Cup was defined by raw, unpredictable human energy. The traveling working-class fan bases from South America, Africa, and Eastern Europe who would sacrifice their life savings to sleep on airport floors, fill the stands with hand-painted banners, and create a deafening wall of organic sound that transformed ordinary tactical fixtures into legendary narrative epics. But in 2026, those traditional supporters have been systematically priced out, entirely replaced by a new corporate spreadsheet engineered by FIFA to turn the tournament into an ultra-exclusive, high-revenue experimental theater. The financial metrics behind this cultural displacement are completely staggering. Through the implementation of dynamic digital ticketing algorithms and exclusive hospitality packages, The average entry-level ticket price for a group stage match skyrocketed by over 600% compared to previous iterations. The sacred, traditional rows behind the goals, historically reserved for the loudest, most passionate supporter groups, were entirely reallocated to official FIFA corporate partners, global technology sponsors, and high-net-worth tech industry executives who view the match merely as a highly marketable networking backdrop for their social media portfolios. This commercial shift created an immediate, turgid aesthetic crisis on international television feeds. While broadcast networks were celebrating record-shattering viewership figures that comfortably surpassed traditional terrestrial TV historic highs, the actual atmosphere inside the hypermodern stadiums felt noticeably sanitized, clinical, and detached from the traditional passion of the sport. The organic songs and deep cultural drums that used to echo through the match updates were replaced by curated, stadium-engineered pop music loops blaring through multi-million-dollar sound systems during the new, elongated water breaks. This corporate takeover reached an absolute peak of public backlash when FIFA attempted to legally enforce a strict stadium boundary rule, banning fans from bringing their own reusable water bottles into the arenas despite the extreme, suffocating summer heatwave sweeping across the United States. The governing body openly mandated that all stadium attendees must exclusively purchase water from the official multi-million-dollar corporate tournament beverage sponsor inside the commercial concourses. The immediate public outrage and collective anger from fan advocacy groups across multiple continents was so intense that it threatened a complete public relations catastrophe, forcing FIFA executives into a chaotic, face-saving reversal within a matter of days. While fans were eventually granted the legal right to carry a single, tiny sealed plastic container, the original reusable bottle ban remained firmly intact under the highly convenient bureaucratic justification of stadium security. This bitter controversy exposed a profound, unyielding truth about the trajectory of modern footballing law. The governing body is no longer just managing a traditional international tournament. They're carefully curating a sterile, corporate-approved luxury entertainment product where the historical heritage of traditional fans is treated as a disposable, low-margin variable. The sport has successfully unlocked unprecedented billions in fresh corporate capital, but in doing so, it has made its stadium seats more expensive than ever before in human history. Yet, as the traditional fans watch from afar, completely locked out of the corporate arenas, the relentless commercial machine is now moving toward its absolute financial and technological peak. The stage is finally set for the ultimate final chapter of our counting, the single most radical, controversial rule implementation that is currently waiting in the dark wings of the final match to permanently destroy the human authority of the game and rewrite the destiny of the sport forever. The massive logistical expansion and corporate transformation of 2026 push the human body and fan culture to their absolute limits. But as the tournament reaches its grand finale on July 19th inside the packed MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, the global game is experiencing its most radical, reality-bending rule change: the absolute automation of match officiating. To fully comprehend the breathtaking, terrifying trajectory of our number one spot, we must look past the flashy corporate sponsors and analyze the deep technological paradigm shift that is actively taking place on the pitch right now. FIFA has officially initiated a quiet, multi-million-dollar coup against the final, most sacred human element in the sport: the subjective authority of the main referee. For over a century, the game belonged entirely to human perception, an emotional landscape governed by split-second instincts, dramatic hand gestures, and the fallible eyes of a crew in black shirts. If an official made a historic, controversial decision, it became a poetic monument to human drama, preserved forever in the hearts of millions of fans who understood that error was an unyielding part of life itself. But in the hyper-surveilled environment of 2026, those raw, human narratives have been systematically engineered out of existence by predictive artificial intelligence networks designed to guarantee a completely flawless, risk-free television commodity for international broadcast syndicates. The introduction of fully automated, sensor-driven rule enforcement has turned the pitch into a clinical, digital laboratory where human officials are rapidly becoming mere animatronic executors of a computer's will. Referees now take the field legally required to wear interconnected body cameras and real-time haptic devices provided directly by the competition data centers, transforming their physical bodies into mobile tracking nodes monitored by remote artificial intelligence algorithms. The software scans the structural lines of the match continuously, calculating tactical variables, tracking ball velocity, and automatically sending instant electric pulses to the officials wrist the exact microsecond a technical rule is broken. There are no more long, dramatic arguments by the corner flag, no more intense face-to-face confrontations over a contested call, and no more human intuition. A player who covers their mouth during a heated clash to hide a comment is instantly identified by regional tracking networks and systematically shown an automatic card. The traditional, spontaneous art of refereeing has been entirely swallowed by a multi-billion-dollar simulation, converting the beautiful game into a highly predictable, clinical enterprise where human instinct is treated as nothing but a dangerous, low-margin liability. This cold technological takeover has completely split the very soul of the footballing community into permanent, data-driven warfare, leaving pure purists to realize that the raw, imperfect sport they fell in love with has been permanently replaced by a sterile corporate product. As the tracking cameras pan slowly across the glittering North American arenas and the final whistle brings this massive, hyper-regulated marathon to its ultimate historical conclusion, we are left with a single, profound truth that the official history books can never truly hide. FIFA has successfully engineered more football, faster pacing, and absolute, flawless mathematical accuracy for their global corporate spreadsheets, but in their relentless pursuit of perfect financial efficiency, they have quietly executed the messy, passionate, and beautiful human spirit that made the sport a global religion in the first place. The rules surrounding the game will continue to evolve. The digital tracking parameters will become even more invasive, and the multi-billion-dollar marketing algorithms will inevitably find new ways to exploit every single second of dead time. But the emotional memory of the sport's unscripted past will remain completely untouched in the archives of history. Do you think this hyper-automated, machine-driven era will comfortably preserve the global dominance of international football for the next century? Or has FIFA permanently destroyed the chaotic, human soul that made the World Cup the greatest spectacle on Earth? Let us know your thoughts, predictions, and theories in the comments below. Remember to leave a deep, passionate like on this video if you enjoyed this immersive journey through the technological evolution of the beautiful game. Smash that subscribe button to permanently join our growing family here at the Football Archive, and be sure to turn on your bell notifications so that you never miss a single chapter of football history. In this video we dive into one football story and tell it the way it deserves, with context, drama, and the details most channels skip. If you love football and want to truly understand the game, subscribe to the Football Archive and never miss a story. Thank you for watching your history unfold, keep the passion alive, and we will see you next time. Bye.